welcome to our panel at What's New in Electronics Live. I'm Dickon Ross, Editor-in-Chief of this magazine, Engineering and Technology, and one of the issues that we've been exploring recently is the mystery of the missing productivity. Productivity has been flatlining for a while now and is not as high as it should be. It's not fully understood why, but we do know that the UK is further behind our competitors in Europe. And recently when we interviewed Mike Wilson, the head of the UK Robotics Association, he suggested that it had something to do with our different culture when it comes to automation and robotics. We tend to lag other countries such as Germany. And I'm here going to start by asking the panel, is that something that rings true in your experience? Perhaps Julian first.
Yes, I'd definitely say that's true, and some of the figures that Mike was talking about in that document was talking about what we call the robot density that's measured by the International Federation of Robotics, and that's a measure of the number of robots per 10,000 people. So this is looks at all the world's numbers, and when you look at these numbers, for example, Germany is sitting at 338, France is 154, and the UK we're sitting down at 91. The global average is 99, so we're way behind the global average. And you've got to start to work out why. You know, we're a fifth global nation when it comes to GDP. So what is happening that is stopping that? And I think it's all about that productivity output per hour that we're missing. It's more or less stagnated in the last 10 years. We've not seen any dramatic change, yet we're in a position where we've got the highest employment that we've been in for some time. And I always think about it like this. Think of the car wash scenario. There was an article in the BBC. 10 years ago, we'd all drive to an automated car wash, drive a car in and it'd be washed. Now what it is, it's 10 guys with a bucket. And that's almost like the reverse of that. Low productivity, but there's high labour usage. So, you know, I think there's some of that adoption that's changing.
Thank you, Julian. For the audience, would you like to tell us who you are?
Yeah, sorry, my name's Julian Ware and I'm from ABB Robotics.
Dave from Hitex.
And
we're a distributor and system integrator in the UK.
Okay, and does it ring true with your experience?
Yes, to a certain extent. I think there's sort of almost a scare factor to how we're going to use these robots and where they're going to integrate into our systems is sort of my short take on that.
Okay. Jeremy, would you like to tell us about yourself and then?
Yeah, I'm Jeremy Hadall. I'm the Chief Engineer at the Manufacturing Technology Centre for Intelligent Automation, and I think robotics and automation, they have a massive role in improving the UK productivity, but I want to see more robots in manufacturing industry. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, but I don't think we should all pin our hopes on just robots solving the productivity issue. That's probably not going to be the entire solution, but it is a big part of the solution going forward.
Mm-hmm. And Adam.
Yes, hi, Adam Sanjurgo from igus UK. We manufacture components for machines, from bearings to energy chain systems. So we're at the sort of the very base of component form manufacturing, and we actually find that we're talking to more and more customers every day about automation and robotics. And I've been at igus for nearly 12 years, and I've seen what I would class as product development from igus, and also customers' interest developing in these products, in automation, in robotics, and we see that it's more and more common that we talk to customers about this, and that goes in any and every industry, from somebody making a machine to make a product, or somebody using a machine to make a product.
Okay. So in your experience, you think that it's getting better?
Absolutely. Yeah, okay. 100%. It's getting better.
Do other members of the panel come across any? What are the company's reasons for caution when it comes to investment in automation?
Yeah, I'd like to answer that. I think there's a lot of scare factors around robotics, or it's not for me type thing, where they see these large automotive manufacturers where they're building a car, and they think, well, I'm not doing that. I've got small manufacturing. I've got variable batch size. We talk about this batch size 1, and mass customization, so they think, well, it's not for me, because they tend to think robotics and automation is once you've got it in place, it's fixed. But that's the whole idea about robotics and automation, that it is flexible, it's scalable. You can have one product that's running today, and tomorrow you can run a completely different product, and that links in with some of that, if you like, fear factor that some of those smaller companies think around that topic.
There are a couple of other factors that we come across quite regularly when we're talking to companies around their implementation of robotics and automation. And the first is access to the good finance. There's a view that it certainly prevails in the UK that to invest in any sort of technology, whether it be a robot or a machine tool or even a forklift truck, you've got to see a return on investment in a couple of years. If you compare that to the likes of German industry, German financing would expect that kind of return on investment in 5 or 10 years on the basis that that robot will be flexible and do multiple things over its lifetime. So that's one issue. The other issue we see a lot is around the skills and the fear that these things are difficult to use, hard to use. You need a whole bunch of skills, and when you've trained somebody up, somebody like the automotive industry will come along and pay that individual a huge amount of money and just suck them straight out of your business. So we need to kind of work out, how do we help businesses finance this investment, but also how do we help them finance almost lifelong learning for their own staff and not rely on apprentices and graduates. That's great, but we need technicians, existing engineers to upskill and train and stick with these companies as robots and automation come into them.
So it's the skill shortage again, is it, in engineering that is one of the obstacles?
Yep, that same problem over and over again.
Does everyone have that?
Yeah.
I completely agree with Jeremy. That's a real factor that we face when we've talked to customers, whether that be on their premises, at a trade show, or they visit igus, and they see the need for using a bit of kit, whether that be a cobot, a robot, a gantry, whatever it might be. They have a process that they want to improve by using something of automation, but they don't have the skill set or the people that can then integrate that or basically make it happen at their place of work. So it's a case of we need more people in automation and with robotics to help this sort of happen effectively.
Okay, and that starts in the schools, I guess.
Yeah, schools, unis, whatever.
Yeah, sorry, what I was going to say was, certainly something we come across quite regularly running training courses is that actually companies are scared to train people beyond a certain level because they think the moment they've done this qualification or they've got this bit of, they're going to be headhunted or start searching for jobs. So actually, in a way, that's certainly a factor that we come across regularly is this scare factor of we're going to invest a lot in people training. Are they going to hang around long enough to get repayment on that investment?
And one thing I'd like to say around that skill shortage as well, as something as from a robotic manufacturer point of view, is making it so the robots are easy to program. So you don't need to have a degree in computer programming to be able to do it. And, for example, a robot that has what's called lead-through programming. So you almost drag the end of the robot manipulator to where you want it to go. You say, yes, I've done it, and you press a button. So you're not sitting there and writing complex code, but you're more teaching it through almost like AI, piece of it, to show it what it needs to be done.
We've talked a lot in that conversation about skills and how we need to encourage young people at schools to get involved in engineering and in particular robotics and automation, and how we need to do lifelong learning. There's another aspect to this. It's about knowledge, and it just struck me when Adam was talking there, he mentioned cobots. Mm-hmm. There's a huge amount of hype around collaborative robots, and yes, they are absolutely part of the environment. They make a huge difference in certain applications, but a lot of it is hype, and there's a lot of misconceptions and poor knowledge around what you can and can't use, not just a cobot, but any type of robot around. And that's a big element for me as a research technology organisation, for the robot manufacturers, for the integrators. Everybody has to get out there and say, no, this is what you can do with a robot. These are the case studies that really work. This is what you should do, and more importantly, this is what you shouldn't be doing. I don't know if anybody else would agree, but I've seen too many robots sitting in backyards of factories covered up because everybody's blamed the robot because the robot doesn't work. It's not the robot doesn't work, it's been poorly applied.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be at Future Robotics yesterday, only for the afternoon, and one of the talks there was from a chap from a company called Pills, and they effectively are a company that are helping people trying to make robots safer, effectively. And I had no idea the level of sort of, not red tape, but the level of sort of knowledge that has to go into making a robot collaborative. It's not as easy as saying, yeah, this robot's collaborative. It has to be tested in every single way to make sure that it actually is.
Yeah, Julian, is that something?
I tend to agree. I think that's where we start. When we talk about an application, we have a look at the application and then say, can that application be a collaborative application before we start to use the words cobot? Because a customer says, I want a cobot, and we say, well, actually, let us look at the application, let's look at the safety around that application, and then we'll decide the right robot that will fit in that application, and then make it safe first of all. And that's almost the starting point of it, rather than just shift a robot in a box and then worry about the safety implications after. And like Jeremy was saying, where it could sit in a corner because it's maybe not doing what it's expected to do, or there was an accident or something.
Yeah, we've got on to cobots, which is a bit of an emotive subject, but one of the interesting about cobots is I lose count, but I've seen so many of them put into factories, and people say they're going to be absolutely collaborative, work next to a human being, and then the health and safety inspector comes along, or somebody who knows a little bit more about it, and said, you sure? Are you really sure that's safe? And that robot's ended up in a cage. It's like, okay, you've got a robot, and you've spent a lot of money for a collaborative robot, because unfortunately they are, at the moment, a lot more expensive than normal robots, and then you put a cage around it. So why don't you just buy a robot?
And then it tends to be a slower robot in a cage rather than an industrial robot that's going to be faster.
Yeah, exactly. It's a slower robot, less payload, and not as useful as a standard industrial robot. Yeah.
Okay, so we need to cut some of the hype, perhaps, about some of this stuff. But I think on this panel we're all agreed that more robots and automation would be generally a good thing. Yeah, and it's something that we desperately need in the UK.
Oh yeah, absolutely. More robots is definitely what we need in the UK, and when I think everybody's starting to realise that. And so yesterday, the House of Commons Select Committee for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy launched a report around automation and the future of work. And one of the big key takeaways from that report is that group of MPs now realise that it's not that we have too many robots, we have too few robots. And if we are going to be a competitive industrial nation, we need to invest in robots. Not just industrial robots, but robots everywhere in society.
Sorry, I was in a factory 2 weeks ago, and I was a little bit disappointed because there was a guy who spent 7 hours a day picking things out of a stillage and putting them onto a conveyor belt, and you think, there's got to be a better way to do this.
And why was he still doing that? Why has that not been automated?
I suspect it was investment or lack of investment, but
it comes down to money.
And I'd also say, that fear factor again around the robotics. They think it's super complex, so they're afraid to invest in robotics. But a lot of the time, that's where we say those sort of projects, the really simple things that are being done, are the first place to start. Because if you put that project in right and it goes well, on budget, on time, then you're going to be more confident rather than start with a really complex project that goes wrong and it ends up, well, I wish I didn't invest in that robot because it didn't work. So understanding of that is quite important. There's also the fact around, it's a bit like the make, do and mend from the war type scenario, where often, that guy's perhaps been in the job for 40 years, been doing this job, and he does a great job of it, and his productivity is great. Maybe there's an old green machine in the corner with a shiny brass plaque that makes one widget an hour, but the Germans got rid of that machine 40 years ago. They've got robots and automation that are now making 100 widgets an hour. So there's a lot of that British culture where we think we've got this old machine and it's got some relays in it, it's not complex PLCs and control systems. So why would I invest in something that's highly complex where I've got to get the skill shortage bit, where I need a PLC programmer to sort it out when it goes wrong, or a robot programmer when it goes wrong. So that skill shortage is part of that as well.
It goes a bit further than that. There's this cultural thing of certainly, and I don't want to criticise SMEs for this, but it seems to be where we see it, of people saying, that machine's been there for 50, 60 years. It's part of the furniture. It could have been installed by my grandfather or my ancestors, and I'm really wedded to that machine. And it's okay because Joe's over there and Joe can fix it just occasionally. And then you go, well, how old's Joe? And they go, well, he retires next year. Okay, can you get the spares for it? Not sure. So how does Joe make it work? Well, he cobbles things together and makes it all work. And Joe's retiring next year. And it's that culture of, it's part of the furniture, why change it? It's not broken. But actually, as Julian said, in Germany in particular and other nations, it would have gone 30 years ago and been replaced by probably a robot.
This brings us to the subject, where we're replacing old machinery, I think that's less controversial, but we're replacing people, then, that raises public concerns, political concerns about we hear about the march of the robots and how so many people are going to lose their jobs, but we're often promised, well, there'll be other jobs created. So can any of you give me some reassurance that, you're the guys who may be doing that?
I can, absolutely, yes. We've got a number of examples at igus through apprenticeships and internships where we've employed people within our business unit of low-cost automation, effectively to support this new trend that we have in automation and supporting our customers. So there's two people specifically in the low-cost automation team. One is a university degree student, and he now is working alongside myself and another colleague, and he helps us with our controllers effectively. And he's employed by igus, and we have another person who is specifically for our Delta robot. So we have a growing team. So the more people that we employ for this team is essentially creating jobs.
And what can I say, when we talk about automation, often it's those dull, delicate, dangerous, dirty jobs that you want a robot to do. And then we talked about earlier on skill shortage, and link it also to the training piece. Well, actually what you do is when you put a robot in to do a particular process, then you upskill the person that was doing that to more value add for your product rather than those dull jobs that they were perhaps doing. You skill them up and move them along to more value add for the product, to increase your productivity, to increase your output, and effectively, increase your margin. So I think it's all about that understanding what you can do with your labour force rather than saying it's going to replace it. It's not replacing. You're trying to take away those dull, dirty, dangerous, delicate jobs from them.
Something I'm quite pleased to see recently is actually that schools seem to be getting much more involved in this sort of thing. My daughter's 6 and has actually started doing some things that I would consider, low-level robotics and coding and things like that. When I was at school, the entirety of the IT program was, can you work out how to work this new thing, Word, out, or Excel or whatever, and anything along those lines was just completely outside the teacher's sort of area. So actually, even at primary school now, they are actually starting to move in the right direction.
And for me, one of the interesting things about this is that history actually teaches us that there will be new jobs. So you talked about the march of the robots. I have a problem with that because media portrayal of robots tend to be Arnold Schwarzenegger as Terminator, although you could argue he's a cyborg. But it's that kind of march of the robots everybody gets really upset about. That's not going to happen. We're decades, if not centuries, away from ever being able to have a robot of that kind of capability. But when you look back into history, 30 years ago, people were worried about the march of the word processor. Go back even further than that, people were worried about the march of the microprocessor, the march of the steam engine, the march of mechanization. Every single time we've had an industrial revolution, yes, jobs have changed and jobs have disappeared, but far, far more jobs have been created. And a really, really relevant example of this, as with the National Agricultural Centre, is farming. Back in the middle part of the 19th century, 25% of the population worked in farming. Today it's 4%. You go back to the middle of the 19th century and ask a 19th century farmer what an app was, or a mobile phone, or a barista even was, they wouldn't have a clue. None of those jobs existed, but now they do.
Yeah, and even to your example, when you were talking about, an example of that, one of our customers is a cobbler, very, very small company, and he saw, from a small Northamptonshire cobbler that in order to be competitive in the market, he needed to put some automation in place, and he never thought that robots would be part of that journey. But now it's into a place where, he often talks events that we have and says how simple they are. To a point where he's got to a place where he's actually starting to employ more people because the output from his factory is increased just because he's put these robots in position to be able to do that for simple cobbling type functions.
So the robots are coming, but it's nothing to be afraid of. It's sure, but it's also slow. So perhaps I think maybe we could finish by each of you giving me what you think the government, on a national level, could be done to increase our uptake of automation and robotics. Start with Adam.
I think it's a case of education, knowledge and investment. And the more that can be done to help that, then more people will be aware of it, more people will be interested in it. And who doesn't like robots? They're cool, right? We've been to various events, schools included, and if you have a robot there that's moving, that's doing something, people are drawn to it.
They're not afraid, they're excited.
No, they're excited. They want to know what it's doing, they want to know what it is, and that's what we see every day. So the more that we can get people excited and interested in it, then it's going to help.
The genie's out of the bottle. We're not going to stop this, and it's a case of whether we want to be competitive or not. So I think for government, the key aspect is realising that this is going to happen, and you need a long-term view, a long-term strategy. You need long-term leadership, and you need long-term incentives to invest in robotics and automation, because that's the only way we will keep pace with some of our near industrial competitors who are doing this already.
Probably financing, some intelligent, low-cost way to finance moving forward. In the 50s, 60s, we didn't get that, and I think we fell behind it industrial-wise with some of our European partners who did get some good financing. And actually, if we were to try and get in there now, we may catch some of that up.
Okay.
And linking to some of this, I think investment is key, but also part of that investment is thought leadership. We need to be taking bigger risks, like we were talking about earlier on, where these smaller companies where they think it's not for me. So I think that's part of it. Linked to also the school stuff, which is the STEM, that they're trying to bring technology into schools to be able to understand that. But I just think we just need people who are more brave than they have been. We started the industrial revolutions that 1, 2 and 3, if you like, and now we're at 4, whereas we weren't part of that industrial revolution 4.0. It seemed to be something that's German, whereas we need to take ownership back of that and maybe start the 4.1 or something and take it on as a UK initiative and say, well, Germans have got 4.0, but we've got 4.1 or something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much to the panel. I think that's all we've got time for, so join me in thanking them. Thank you.
Thanks.